Hello and welcome to the Ooze.tv. My name is Spencer Burke, your host for ThinkFwd. In this week's episode, I sit down with Alexie Torres-Flemming, and we talk about her life and ministry in the Bronx. It's amazing when you listen to the stories and you start to see how relationships can have such a wonderful impact, not only on the people, but even the community at large. I hope you enjoy this week's episode here on the Ooze.tv. Well, Alexie, I had a great time with you in New Mexico as we gathered together, and we heard your phenomenal story. And so I encourage people to go out on YouTube and check that out. In fact, in the show notes, we'll have a link to your story. But tell us a little bit about your work here that you do with the center here.
So I founded 15 years ago a center called Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice in the South Bronx, in the poorest congressional district in the United States. And I came out of the Catholic tradition, out of the social teaching tradition, but really felt like there was so much richness in that tradition, and yet young people in the South Bronx and nationally really just kind of relegated to the choir, to basketball teams, and to youth group dances. Yeah. And I just thought there were so many issues in the South Bronx, so many issues where I was growing up, and that we could do more to connect young people to their faith in a way that connected them to their communities.
Yeah.
So that's what Youth Ministries is about, is connecting young people in that way, training them to be organizers, and to really look at their neighborhood as God's kingdom, and to bridge the on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah.
And to make sure that they're building that and making sure through looking at issues of environmental justice, policing, housing, education reform, immigration reform, all of the things that aren't quite right here.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, people tend to think of them as individual things, but in reality, it's hard to do social justice without doing discipleship. It's hard to actually look at the environment without creating mentorship. It's hard to live in your neighborhood without trying to think of the kingdom.
Exactly. And I think, too often we grow up with this false dichotomy, and we get the sense that, if church is a place and it's about getting to another place.
Yeah.
And there's no connection between the two. And I love to use the metaphor of the cross, firmly grounded and planted, on the earth. Imagine how firmly it had to be dug in order to hold up the body of our Lord, but also reaching really high up to the sky, and then connecting to the thieves on the side, but also connecting to all of humanity, and I think that sort of full circle, if you will, is what God calls us to be here. But too often it's just too separated, and this sense of who I am is, as a person of God, is connected to making it somewhere else someday into heaven. And who I am on earth is connected to, making it and surviving, and not who I am as a part of a community. And so I think there's some real power in integration.
Yeah. Well, and the other part is that sometimes we try to solve one problem and maybe we create another by doing it, or we are kind of myopic and we don't really look at it as integrated. Now, working with you're solving multiple problems. There's a little bit of training, there's a little bit of life, a little bit of social justice. I mean, all of that is very interesting working with you.
I think what's happened is, the sort of dominant paradigm that we work with young people outside of the church, first of all, as you said, solves one problem but creates another, which is, maybe it solves the problem where young people, are able to somehow get up and out of poverty. But what happens is you get what is called the brain drain. You get folks moving up and out and never coming back. You get folks being left behind. And you get this sense, you kind of reinforce this myth, I think this American myth, right? That it's about the rugged individualism and rugged individual success versus what I know as a child of God, which is that we belong to each other. And so I think that does a disservice. And I think in church we do the same disservice in as much as we relegate young people to keeping them busy, entertaining them, but not really engaging them or training them in the things of this world. And so we focus more on whether they're having sex or doing drugs, and we become the sex and drugs police when there's so much else that utterly hurts them and destroys them and does not work in terms of building the kingdom of God. And so I just think it's really important to do all of those things. And I think for us, what I see is when we're building and we're working with young people, in engaging them in social change, they see a connection to God in seeing a connection to each other. There's a sense of selflessness that comes out. There's pride and the sense of accomplishment. There is, young people learn all about history, about school, about, they do better academically. I mean, there's just so many, as you say, sort of multiple ways that you can solve these problems and connect young people to a walk with God that's bigger than sometimes what we think it is.
As you've been doing this, and I hope I'm not putting it on the spot or whatever, but sometimes there is a surprise or even a personal aha moment or whatever in the last, year or so. Is there something that you've thought like, wow, that something new or interesting that is connected to kind of what your work and where you're at?
I think there's lots of moments like that. I think one of the first for me was this sense that I went into this work as a woman of faith with the thought that I would save poor people. And I think 15 years has taught me that I can't possibly do that, and that in many ways they saved me. And this weekend, I spent the entire weekend with a woman from the church who happens to be undocumented and was accused of stealing. I went with her as she turned herself in. I sat with her, I sat in court while she was arraigned on Sunday, and just experienced the sea of people going in and out of that courtroom. What others would say are, immigrants or the dregs of society or the worst of the worst, and felt such utter and complete love for them. And this real sense that there are stories that are so hidden that we don't understand, and that it's so easy for us in our walk of faith, in our intellect, to kind of just black and white people, And so I think such a deep lesson that I've learned is, we are so much more than who we are in the moment. We are, and others are a collection of their stories, of their experiences, and we just in this what's the word, soundbite society,
exactly.
lose so much by doing that to young people, to people that you meet on the street. We just have lost this great sense of connection that I think makes us so much richer and makes us able to serve and gives us compassion. Those are some of the most powerful lessons I've learned.
I love that, thinking beyond kind of objectifying people or things and labeling them, and really taking the chance, the gamble in some ways, to hear and see and touch and feel real people in real situations. I think sometimes we're isolated so often from our programs and buildings, and almost the system we've created creates church here and
people there, and creates a relationship to them that is about us doing good, us serving, but it doesn't really, there's not the sense of solidarity, there's not the sense of what is it to walk in your shoes, what is it but for the grace of God, and it's so important to us to be able to stand above, to be able to feel that we can be of service to someone. And it's very difficult to feel like, I can just witness, be a witness to your life. Be present and be a witness to who you are and your journey and your story. To stand in that courtroom or to sit and not be in judgment, not sort of sit with my mind of, well, that sounds guilty or not. But, knowing, just hearing the story, imagining that everyone that has victimized was at one point a victim themselves. And I think it's so liberating to be able to witness people like that, and to, I think those are the surprises that kind of catch you when you experience God's children.
Exactly.
Those are the surprises.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I look forward to hearing more about what you're doing and being surprised each and every day as I walk even in the street here, looking into the eyes of each person and seeing